Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started. Thank you. My name is Rich Lyons. I'm the Dean here at Berkeley-Haas. Welcome to today's Dean Speaker Series. We're glad that you could join us today and past events and in coming events. This is our highest level speaker series, as you know, where we bring in leaders to bring us perspective on leadership in the many dimensions of leadership. Today's discussion will be focused on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. How do we think about what is inclusive leadership? These are some of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. We're extremely fortunate to have a leader who has written and spoken and done a lot of work in this area. We're fortunate to have Christie Smith, who is just to my left here from Deloitte. Christie, thank you for coming. So Christie is, if I may jump to this, someone who embodies all four of our defining principles. The one that I want to call out in particular is students always. She has committed a large chunk of her career to continually learning, reading, updating her own understanding of how the world is changing in this area. It's an evolving topic. It's a complicated topic. She is at the forefront of it. She has, in fact, called inequality in corporate America the leadership issue of our time. Before we get started, let me say a few more words about her background. She currently serves as both the West Region Managing Principal for Consulting, as well as the Managing Principal for Deloitte University's Leadership Centers for Inclusion and Community Impact. I've, in fact, attended conferences at Deloitte University the last couple of summers, and it is just outstanding programming that they run, and I met Christie first when I was there at DU, Deloitte University. In these dual roles, her responsibilities include markets, clients, talent, and community for more than 2,400 consulting practitioners and more than 250 principals and directors. Christie says that what she most enjoys about her role is the opportunity to ignite conversations about how our business world can, quote, fundamentally redefine, end quote, approaches to issues such as inclusion. For those of you that understand our mission statement, we talk a lot about redefining how we do business, right? That's right at the core of the way we think about this business school and the leaders that we produce as well. So this is what we're going to talk about here today. Her work, including her co-authored white paper, Uncovering Talent, A New Model of Inclusion, has been featured in numerous publications, Fast Company, Fortune, Harvard Business Review, New York Times, Forbes, and many others. Haas lecturer Erica Pung has been using Christie's research this semester in her leadership course. I understand that the students have absolutely loved it. I was just talking to Michael Katz about this, and I know it's been a big hit in our curriculum as well. As a result of her many accomplishments and commitment to inclusion, San Francisco Business Times placed Christie among the most influential women in business in 2012, again in 2013, again in 2014, and Diversity Journal listed Christie amongst their women to watch in 2013. There's much we have to talk about today. No doubt many of you will have questions, so please get ready to ask them. We have the microphones there. We will get to that in about a half an hour after I get a chance to talk to Christie. So thank you again for being with us here today, Christie. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Before we get started,
Please.
I have to say that when I came on to campus and I saw the big banner that said my name, I was incredibly embarrassed, but I had to take a picture of it and send it to my two 9-year-olds and say, see? See?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. The 9-year-olds are the toughest audience. They're brutal. They're brutal.
I am just a wrestling mate to them.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So this notion of being effective leaders in a diverse world and then going even further than that, right? This idea of inclusive leadership itself. Mm-hmm. How do you define that term, inclusive leader? How do you think about shaping it at Deloitte?
I think for a long time we have talked about emotional intelligence as a key attribute to define a great leader. I think that we have to move from emotional intelligence to emotional maturity. And that really is what inclusive leadership is about. So if you think about emotional intelligence as a leader taking a test and understanding their own makeup, emotional, psychological, all of that, that's great. I can take that and I can put it in the drawer behind me, right? And not really think about it consciously in my day-to-day activities. When a leader moves from from emotional intelligence to emotional maturity, that leader is now outward facing. So that leader needs to have a sense of vulnerability, has to be, suspend self-interest in order to develop others. An emotionally mature leader has a deep understanding of culture. And I don't mean just the culture that is on the wall or the writing points from the PR and communications team that gives it to him or her. I mean, what does it really feel like to be in this organization? And what are the subcultures that exist? What does it mean, and what is consistent and inconsistent in our culture for the multiple generations that are within it? Those are qualities that I think define an inclusive leader. And I will say that we were speaking about this earlier, and my pet peeve today is that many talk about an inclusive leader as being authentic. And I think, unfortunately, we have watered the definition of authenticity so down to a couple of sound points about what a leader did on the weekend. That's transparency. And so many of our leaders are being touted as authentic because, they tell those little quips or stories, or because, they were, in a children's hospital and caring for the kids. My deep passion around this is that authenticity is a journey of life experiences that form the way you show up in the world. Not just as a leader, but as a parent, as a friend, as a student, as a worker among workers. And you cannot flip a switch to say, oh, I'm going to be authentic right now. You must go through the grueling process of understanding those experiences and how they link to relationships and how we show up. So I think all of those define an inclusive leader.
I love that. There's so much in that answer. I mean, you talked about sort of self-interest. You talked about and the need to subordinate that. The idea of focusing on the development of others, at least as much as the development of oneself as a leader, right? I think when people start their careers, they aren't necessarily at that place, right? Nikita Mitchell, one of our graduates from a couple years ago, came back and spoke to the incoming first-year MBA class just about a month and a half ago. And she said many wonderful things. One of the things I remember she said is, there's so much pressure in business school and in life to be one thing. And I'm many things. Right. And sometimes I'm working so hard that I realize I need to be one thing for the next week. But I also want to be conscious of this fact that I'm many things. And so that notion of being authentically one's many selves seemed to be part of her message as well.
Well, and I think this is the greatest failure of diversity and inclusion programs in corporate America, certainly for the last 40 years. First and foremost, we have to admit the fact that we have failed miserably. So let's just be honest, tell the truth. But what we've done is exactly what she said, which is we have defined diversity and inclusion in organizations by segregating different groups: Black, white, women, Hispanic, European, Asian. And what that only has served to do is continually to separate us and to call out our difference rather than building a bridge to what we might have in common. And I think that to that point, we have a exercise that we do in one of our labs around intersectionality. So to her point, not being one thing, we have a large deck of cards that have, descriptors on it. So parent, athlete, emotional illness, first generation, all sorts of things. And we hand them to the executives in the room, and we ask them, and we have Black, Asian, we have all those descriptors, and we ask the leaders to sort the cards. And we say, sort and pick all the ones that really describe who you are. So most of them pick out 25, 30, and then we say, okay, pick 5. And they groan, and it takes them a long time to get those 5. And then we say, pick 1. And 2 things happen. One is the one that they pick has nothing to do with their physical appearance, and usually has nothing to do with their career. No, title or anything like that. It has to do with life, right? And the second thing is they have that aha moment, like, oh my God, that's what we ask every employee to do, is to pick 1. And that's how we define them. We define them by their race, color. We define them, are they in our culture, a one performer is the top performer. Are they a 1 performer? As if that speaks to their whole personality, right? Have we asked what cost of getting that 1 is? So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to disrupt the thinking around in organizations.
Well, it's a great technique.
I have long-winded answers.
No. This is an important. I think hearing
I'm
about
not passionate.
how the world is practically moving forward in these areas, right? What kinds of exercises do reframe, the context. That's wonderful. So let's help us because you work with a lot of clients this way, and you obviously think about Deloitte this way as well. But when you think about the top reasons why companies should be invested in diversity and inclusion, how do you describe? I know there are many, and of course it is the right thing to do. But can you talk a little bit about that business case part?
Well, many of the clients who call me because they've been caught in some sort of diversity and inclusion storm. I wasn't going to say just storm, but that's why they call me, and they want. You guys are quick. So they're on defense. Right. Yeah. And so they want me to get them out of hock, and frankly, with those clients, you got to start where the client is, right? So if that's the issue, we will help them with what to get out of hock, but we then create transformation in the organization as the second. Like, you're going to be right back here with a lawsuit if you don't do these things, right? I'm typically not talking to, believe it or not, the HR leader or the chief diversity officer. I'm typically talking to the CEO. Because this topic has become so visible, they are the most vulnerable. From personality, from the, just clearly as their leader and their leadership style. Now, there are other companies who truly call me and say, we want to change the world. And we want inclusion to be the vehicle in which we do that. A large retail athletic company called us in to do just that. And I wake up every day saying I want to change the world, and that's not a trite comment. I want to change the world. And so when I went to this company in particular, I thought, do they really want to profit, getting stuff out? They really wanted to. And I will say they are well on their way of making huge difference in the world from inclusion being the vehicle by which to do that.
One of the things we've surveyed the students, and with the students' help, we've also surveyed our faculty, because we need to get better at this as well. And so when we ask the students, for example, what percentage of you feel that understanding race-related dynamics are important to being an effective leader, we get 90% saying yes to that. when we ask how many of you feel comfortable having conversations in the workplace or otherwise around race, we get less than 50% on that.
Yeah.
When we did, after the students sort of engaged with us on some of these, we devised a survey and put it out to the faculty as well, right? Because we have some new classes on the business case for diversity. What you want ultimately is for this to be fully ingrained. So we wanted to ask all of our faculty, how many of you feel comfortable talking about diversity and inclusion in the classroom? And the numbers were very, very low, right?
Sure.
So part of that conversation is how do we advance that comfort level? So that's this question here. When you think about whether it's a stigma around these conversations or it's just discomfort for whatever reason, how do we increase the comfort level around having these conversations as a school or as a Deloitte? Do you have any suggestions there?
Well, yeah, that's why we did the work on covering.
Right.
Language matters, right? And I think that when you go into an organization and people are talking about diversity and inclusion, it's a lightning rod, right? Or people yawn, right? Because programs and initiatives haven't been effective. This is really about unleashing human potential. And that's how we talk about it. We don't talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about unleashing human potential within your organization. One individual, one group, one unit, and then the organization as a whole. And so we dissect an organization and all its subcultures, and we get intimate with those leaders to say, what does unleashing human potential look like for everyone within your organization? And the piece on covering was hugely instrumental to shifting the dialogue from diversity and inclusion, which is, ironically, because it has the word inclusion, which connotes, difference, right? Connotes that we're separating from each other. Covering really allowed us to do two things. One is to change the language around a stigmatized identity. Two, it did three things. Two, it gave us the language by which we could talk about not just our differences, but our similarities. So when I went back and looked at how I answered things, and I looked at how does my qualitative and quantitative data match against the whole cohort group, I mean, there was huge correlation amongst everyone in that cohort. So black women, Asian men, white guys, all of it. And so the importance of that is that we're no longer focused on what makes us different, but shifting the conversation to what do we share, common ground, right? And it does require courage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Especially in such a politically, intense environment today.
So you've done a lot of pioneering work in that area. I just want to drill down into it a little bit more because some students or people in the audience won't know it as well. The percentage of people who, when being honest, say they cover to one degree or another, a little bit on the data side. I mean, it's
You're going to challenge my memory now.
Well, but it doesn't have to be the actual percentage, but the pervasiveness of it, right? It is. Right?
Certainly pervades. I mean, we continue to do the study after we published the first paper. And we are scheduled to do an update.
Yeah.
But the percentage of individuals who did the survey, and we surveyed now, it's about 7,000 participants globally. And I think the percentage now is 72% state that they cover.
Wow.
And of that, the important part of that is, of those, I think it's well over 50% state that they do it at harm to themselves, and it impacts their commitment to the organization in which they're in. So there's going to be a lot of regrettable losses out there for organizations. Yeah. But I just want to add one more point, which is that of these respondents, over 50% say that the demand to cover comes from leaders and from the culture within the organization. That was hugely significant because we moved from blaming the victim for the position they're in.
Stop covering.
Yeah, right. To, this is a leadership issue.
Yeah.
This is a culture issue. And, that was an enormous shift because we had not seen that in any piece of research before. And so where we focus our attention today is on inclusive leaders and building the leadership habits of being inclusive, of unleashing human potential in the leaders we work with today.
Yeah, and you used the phrase stigmatized identities, right? So there are a lot of identities out there that that people cover, right? So it's not just traditional categories, right? It's they people cover a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal story is I never really covered, as being gay. I'm out, but what I did, I'm so out. But what I did cover was being in the towers on 9/11. And I suffered from anxiety and depression, and it was a horrific time, as you might imagine. It happened to correlate with my starting my career at Deloitte as a partner. And so I covered all of that in order to show up as a rock star partner and prove myself. And I did that. I've been at the firm for 15 years. I probably did that for 10 or 11 years. And it really wasn't until I was standing in front of a group of veterans that I was asked spontaneously to address. And
within the firm?
Veterans who we bring in.
Got it.
We take them through a program to help them transition from military service to the private sector. And as I picked my head up and I looked at this group, I realized these were 9/11 babies. And I lost it. It was in one way, a shining moment, and really not, because my mascara went all over the place. So, I'm just kidding. So it unleashed, right? And I was shaking. I was not myself.
Yeah.
And I went up to my room that evening, and the compartment that I had put that in literally blew up. And I was really unsettled.
Yeah.
But what I refused to do the next day is show up perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a powerful story. It's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. So as we think about, the students, given the nature of Berkeley and the nature of this business school, we attract students who have a natural passion in this area. And when they leave here and go into that working world, right, in kind of early career roles, do you have any advice for them in thinking about how to continue to move these things forward?
Yeah, I addressed some of our interns this summer. I did the closing, I think it was the closing keynote for them. And what I conveyed was be fearless. And truly be fearless. Because frankly, if you got something to say, say it when it comes to your conviction of who you are. Say it when it comes to your conviction of what is happening in the world, and that you came here because you wanted to change. And if you get crap from a leader about it, there are a lot of other companies that will accept you. And that's what I mean by fearless. I think that this generation, more than any other, because of its numbers, because of its access, its digital, qualities or their abilities, they have the power to change the world.
Yeah.
Not, I said to you earlier, I'm a millennial trapped in a boomer body, but it's this don't let anybody throw water on the fire that is in your belly. And be courageous, be bold, and do not compromise. Don't compromise. Because there will be a leader in your organization who either gives you air cover or who has the courage to say, God, you brought me back to what I used to be like, you know, and who will bond with you. Or, you know, you will have a rough time. But your generation is very adaptable. And so you don't, like me, you don't have a problem going somewhere else. But find the company that matches your passion.
Yeah. And so on that question, if I'm in an interview, right, or suppose you're in an interview and I represent a company, how would you learn about this company's culture, particularly with respect to diversity and inclusion? Are there some questions one might ask in an interview?
I think one of the greatest things, again, about the people who are interviewing with us, and this is, you know, from entry level all the way up, because I interview all the direct admit partners and directors in the West. And so they do their homework, right? They go online, they find the real, the ugly, whatever it is about the company and their culture, and they will ferret it out in that interview. So often they will be the ones bringing up, you know, well, I saw a paper, or is that really reflective of Deloitte's culture? You know, I saw your numbers, right, in terms of women in your organization. Why are they so low? And you know, I've had many of these interviews and chuckled, like, I'm so glad you're asking this question. I would have never had the nerve when I was interviewing, right?
Yeah.
But I think that is their advantage. I think the other thing that you really have to ask is not what is the culture at Deloitte, but what is the culture in the area that I'm going into? So what is the culture of human capital, you know, organization and talent group?
I see.
How do they operate?
Kind of the local, the subculture.
How do they react in a soft market? How do they react in, you know, the good times? What usually happens? What messaging goes out, you know, to employees when, you know, difficult or great times? And I think those kinds of targeted questions really gets you more of a picture. And then I would, you know, frankly, I'd ask all your friends.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would go to Glassdoor because I think, well, I mean, it's a data point, but I would go find friends who work there.
Yeah. And you mentioned global before. Obviously, Deloitte's a very global enterprise. What private sector experience I've had in HR, I recall, you know, people talking about, well, how about this survey question and that survey question, and somebody saying, hey, understand that practice in India is illegal. I mean, you're talking about asking somebody to reveal something that is verboten in that place. So can you talk to us a little bit about kind of global and inclusion and maybe some challenges you faced?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is you know, a great example of Deloitte, and this is going on for a company I'm serving as well. You know, we have Deloitte USI, so we have about 30,000 employees in India, and we were going to open the Leadership Center for Inclusion in India. And we did that about 3 years ago. And, you know, we knew there was, you know, women we had to focus on. We knew we had to focus on abilities, right? And I said, we need to focus on LGBT. Not because I am, but because I know it to be an issue in India. And there were some very intense conversations, very intense conversations. And so we ended up not focusing on LGBT, which I regret. But when they changed the laws in India to make LGBT illegal, we were really at a critical point of, well, we've got so many employees there. Do we lean in on this or don't we?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm proud to say that the firm leaned in big time, and we added this population to the Center for Inclusion, and we made it very clear to the Indian government that we will protect any employee no matter their status, their sexual orientation. And so I think companies have to take that stance, not just where they are, but worldwide. You think about a Tim Cook, or you think about Benioff.
Exactly.
These two guys are unbelievable in terms of what they're doing
willingness
around
to send a signal.
human rights,
Yeah.
social justice, not just in this country, but around the globe.
Yeah.
So I think they're shining examples, frankly, of how you do it right.
Yeah, exactly. Can you talk a little bit, because that's hard to do, if appropriate, can you talk about the cost of sending that signal, right? I mean, does and maybe this is an unfair question, but
No.
you know, it's courageous because it's hard, right?
Right.
Because it's costly. And
Right. Well, it can be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what you define as cost. If you're only defining cost by revenue,
Yep.
maybe, but what's the greater cost?
Great.
You know, it's our brand,
Yep.
right? So if our insides don't match our outsides, you guys are going to find that out in a nanosecond and take it to the airways. So, you know, which I applaud you for. But we need to be credible
I got you.
and stand behind that.
Yeah.
I think the other point to your question is that, you know, another thing that we are transforming in organizations is how do you look at global diversity and inclusion,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So most, I mean, again, 40, 50 years, we have had a peanut butter approach across the globe for diversity and inclusion, right? It's been women. First thing anybody will tell you, ex-US. It's a women's problem, right? What we began to do is do research probably about a year and a half ago to map every country to see what the biggest diversity issues were. So that, because it's not a peanut butter
No,
approach.
it's not.
It is
Well, they're indigenous populations. that are
exactly.
vastly
So
different.
it's country by country by country.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do geospatial predictive analytics to say, you know, what is Germany's population going to look like in 10 years? And the companies that are in that country, what is their talent pool? And are they prepared for that shift? And if they're not, well, they're going to be hurting mightily. So that kind of transformation, both by you know, intense analytics that we've never used before in this space, to really taking a customized approach, if you will, country by country. Our clients who do that send a very, very different signal.
It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
fascinating. You know, you mentioned LGBT. Just one
Yeah.
quick factoid. As we were walking literally over here, somebody called me over to the office and said, you know, today, the very day, 25 years ago, is when what we call our Q at Haas Club
Yeah.
got started. This is our LGBT.
Yeah.
And 25 years ago, you know, and that was a source of pride for us.
Yeah, sure.
We don't know that there was any other business school that was
Right.
as far ahead, but we, you know, we, like any institution, we have a long ways to go, and it's also nice to reflect on some of the things that have happened, right? And because there's been some remarkable success as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to celebrate the successes. You know, I go into every organization. I'm not there as the Grim Reaper to tell them everything that's wrong. I'm there to say, what do we celebrate? You know, and how do we use that as an example? And how are we visible about it? How are we always going back and talking about it consistently? And then what are the other bright spots that come up?
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, something like that is a great example.
Yeah. I want to make sure people have time for questions, because I know you have questions. So for those of you that want to ask a question, the microphone is right there. I've got a couple more I could ask, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity. Thank you.
Now the tough questions come.
Here we go. Here we go.
I wanted to pick up on a thread that Dean Lyons you were talking about, where one of the student-driven surveys mentioned how people are uncomfortable with the topic of talking about race in the workplace. So I think a question for Christie is, what role does discomfort play? Like, can that conversation and can growth actually happen if there is no discomfort at all? And then the other piece of the question I want to ask is the exercises around covering and finding common ground. Part of me finds real value in that because there's human connection and that's like a starting point for a lot of discussion. But I think my question is, does it stop there, right? Like there's real systemic violent differences that people have in their experiences that may not come out in that type of conversation. So how do you get people to understand the experience of people that face racial discrimination or are afraid to walk down cops or whatever and bring that conversation out in the workplace without equalizing everything necessarily?
Yeah, I'll start there, and then I'll ask you to remind me of the first question. So, you know, I had a town hall, and it was spontaneous with our San Francisco office. After the police shootings, I mean, it was a succession of things, right? Police shootings, Orlando, the black men being shot by police officers. And I did it quite spontaneously because I felt like there was such incredible fear in the office. It was palpable to me. And there was this tension because no one dared talk about it. So, and despite the color of your skin, people were covering. So people were covering having police officers in their family. You know, people were covering that they've lived their whole life teaching their nieces or nephews, well, their nephews really, or their sons, to always be on the defensive, which is so tiring as black men, right? And they were covering the nuances of what these tragedies really are in our country. And it was institutional covering because no one in the office was going to talk about it. And so I think that one way to get to that is, you know, have your pop-up conversations, get groups together to invite them, see who shows up, right? And have the discussion. Like, this is a safe place. I mean, there was a fear when we did the town hall. There was a fear that, you know, what I got back was, well, no, Christie, you can't do that because we're going to start, you know, arguments across people in the firm, and it's going to be, you know, this whole us against them, and, you know, this is going to go down a rat hole. Never happened. In fact, what happened was people talked about their feelings, and they started to solution spontaneously, right? How do we have more of these? Should we drive them as employees? I think that is, I mean, this is such a perfect place to do that, right? Is to someone have the courage to convene a conversation, right? And whether that's formal or informal, you've got a faculty member sponsoring it or not, I just think we're not talking enough, right? Because what takes precedent for you? Paper, you know, assignment, something like that. And so it's easy to cover because I got 1,000 different other priorities. But I would fight against all of those priorities and have the courage to have a convening. What was your first question?
Just about the role of discomfort
Oh.
versus comfort.
Yeah, I think disruption, better said, is really critically important. And I think that discomfort, if you are uncomfortable interacting with someone or having the conversation, you're doing the right thing. I think it's just an indicator. right? Now, you also have to accept that you might be rejected in your comment. You also have to be prepared for a strong voice coming back to you. But the courage that you demonstrate in being okay in that discomfort will serve you so well moving forward.
Thanks. Just a quick comment. Please come forward if you have a question. That, you know, for our faculty, we, in part through conversations with the students and trying to enrich the classroom experience across the board, we have these wonderful added classes, as I mentioned. We've been collecting a set of sort of mini cases from our faculty of experiences they themselves have had, right? So when it's peer-to-peer saying, here's how the conversation came up, here's how I addressed it, here's how I might have addressed it next time, right? Or might, we think that that's going to be a vehicle that will help a faculty that have already, because of the survey that I've mentioned, have let us know that they find this difficult, right? And it's consistent with the point you made.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I think going back to the first question around inclusive leadership and defining it, this is an area where you suspend self-interest, right? And as leaders or as faculty members, you know, not worrying, I mean, literally having the courage to not worry about, am I going to make tenure or not? Or, you know, is this going to be, you know, am I inciting something or not? Or just even a one-to-one conversation. Am I not going to look like the big shot professor? I mean, and I run into this in the corporate world, the big shot executive, right? So this notion of suspending self-interest to really understand the experience of someone else, I think is foundational to shifting this conversation.
Love it. Please.
So you had mentioned that when people inquire about company culture, that you recommended that people go more specific to the department that they're going to be entering in. So the way that I received that is that it kind of implies that department culture is different across the company. So I was just, wondering how, I mean, doesn't there kind of come about problems with inconsistency in company culture across departments and how the brand is received to the public? And if you are, you know, have a leadership kind of mentality, if you're going to be representing a company, you're not just representing that department. You know, when the public doesn't see Deloitte with just like the you know, human resources department, they see the entire company. So how, if they want to represent the entire brand, how do they kind of balance that?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question. I think that a company like Deloitte can have a set of shared values that are our guiding principles for the culture that exists within the firm, right? But I think, you know, culture, and what we spend a lot of time doing is making sure we have the right leaders in the right places who embody that culture. Because leaders will define the culture of those they are leading, whether that's a CEO in each of our businesses. But the way that trickles down is, you know, service line by service line is going to have a different leader. And that leader can create an environment, because, I mean, we are 280,000 across the globe. You know, that leader, and so we don't have, you know, happy leaders that we're happy with all over the place. No company does. But you can have a leader who leads by fear and with a stick, and that is the culture of that service line, right? Or you could have, but that leader is killing his or her numbers. And so when they go into year end and they've killed their numbers in their area, people aren't asking about, well, what's the culture? You know, how did he or she get that? You know, and we've begun to do. I mean, we've been doing that for the last 5 to 7 years, maybe longer. Another culture could be, you know, this fantastic leader who's all about, you know, raising people up. So it's not as if those service lines aren't connected to the principles, those guiding principles and those values, but they are human beings, right? And human beings define culture. And we often think it's this, you know, magic fairy dust out there within an organization. It's not. It just isn't. So, I mean, HP is a great example, you know, years ago of that. You know, I would say Amazon's a great culture. While it's one of the best companies, while it's one of the best companies in the world, people are churning in and out of there because it's just it's a ridiculous environment, you know?
You said that that people aren't asking how they got those numbers, is kind of what you said. But do you think with like the transition to the millennials, like the mentality that's kind of grown with that generation, do you think that they will begin to ask the how?
This is why you're my greatest hope, right? Because
okay.
Yeah. Let's exchange information afterwards. Yeah, I mean, I think yes is the answer. I mean, the millennials in our organization fundamentally changed our business model in consulting. Because they said, I'm not getting on a plane Monday morning and coming back Thursday night. You know what? You guys got to fit into my life, right? I'm not fitting, I'm not, working with no life, right, kind of thing. And so, so yes, I think you will ask that. I mean, I've just finished a second piece of research on millennials, and the clear data says that you want to be part of a company that it has purpose. Purpose-driven profits, not stick-driven profits. And so if that's the case on the majority of people who are going to be in our organizations, some of these guys who are doing it with a stick, their personal reputations will be online, because you know what? You're going to write about it. And people have, which is how we found out where there are some leaders that need a little coaching.
Thank you for
That
that.
kind of coaching.
Thank you for that question. Please. Looks like.
Something that troubles me when I go and work in companies, especially consulting firms and investment banking, is where they hire their students. And most of them like to hire from their alma mater. And their alma maters happen to be Ivy Leagues, and
That's
that
right.
leaves out a large portion of our population.
That's right.
And I was wondering if there were some strategies that you had to change these types of practices.
Yeah, I think it is as troubling to you as it is to me. And one of the things that we've started to consult companies on, and because we want our insides to match our outsides, we are trying to do ourselves. We're not trying. We are beginning to do ourselves, which is to go out and hire from community colleges, right? And so we have a whole effort around this. And when I talk to companies and when I talk to my own company about this, the argument is pretty easy. Most people will never be able to afford these colleges, right? Ever. And there is some amazing talent who can't afford four-year schools like this that are going to community college, right? So we have got to go find those hungry souls who will probably work their butts off 100 times more than some of those coming out of the Ivy Leagues.
That's great.
And I just don't mean community colleges. I just mean beyond those 25.
Other places. That's a great. So we have time for two more questions. This will be the penultimate one. Real quickly, I just have to brag on behalf of the institution. So part of the California Master Plan for Higher Education, and it's still true here, 1/4 of our undergraduate business majors are community college transfers.
I love that.
It's part.
Bravo.
It's been part of this business school forever, and it's just an anchor to what we do for and with society. Please.
Hi, thanks for being here today.
Sure.
One of the comments that was made early on was about how we as people are far more than some of the kind of the organized affinities that we associate with. And I think purely because they're easy and they're visual. And it seemed like the focus that you're advocating, and I really want to hear if I misunderstood what you were saying, But the focus we should be advocating is more about who we are as people rather than what we look like. And while I wholeheartedly agree with that, I don't feel like we as a society are yet at the point where we can look at people for who they are rather than what they look like. Giving people the opportunity to organize in that way in major organizations, I think is actually really empowering, because it gives people the opportunity to recognize that issues that they may have been facing either in the workplace or their personal life or just in society in general aren't necessarily just problems that they're facing. And it can take exposure to that larger affinity group for them to realize, oh, it's not just me, this is a major societal problem, and that can fundamentally shift how then they go forward and treat that problem or attack it or just deal with people in a different way that can showcase who they truly are. And so I guess I want to find out kind of exactly where you were coming from, and it sounded like kind of discouraging that affinity group assimilation, and that to me, it doesn't seem like we're yet in a place in society where it's safe to do that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, so I was, it's not an either or, okay? I think, and it depends on the organization. Some of the organizations that I work with need to not have those affinity groups in the way that they've had them, right? Because it has been isolating, right? And we find that out through data. So it's not like we're just coming in and saying, blow it up, right? We're finding out through data. I mean, if the purpose of affinity groups, and historically this has been it, is for people who share a common identity to navigate the corporate culture and move up, well, that's failed, right? That is something that has failed. If affinity groups are today more geared toward bringing people together and bridging to another affinity group in order to certainly share that common ground that you're talking about, but to also focus them on innovation. So I'll give you an example. You know, Frito-Lay, many, many years ago, you know, they released the Dorito, right? And the Hispanic group was meeting with, I want to remember which group this was, but I think it was the Asian group, right? And they're talking and they're thinking, well, we should have a different kind of chip, right? And the Hispanic said, well, would you guys eat guacamole chips, right? And they said, yeah. And then the Asian came up with a flavor. They both went to the R&D department. R&D said, we love this idea. The chips go on market. They're the highest selling chip they've ever had in history. So if groups can bridge, you know, have their bonding identity, but come together to bridge identity for innovative sake, and everybody wins, you know, I'm an advocate of it. But I think we are there in society. I just think we haven't collectively given voice collectively to a more, to our humanity. I don't think we do it.
Thanks.
But we can
for the
talk
question.
more about it.
Thanks,
I can
Christie.
see your wheels turning.
Yeah. Please.
Sorry, I'm on the shorter side. So you mentioned your town hall and then your efforts with global diversity. Just looking at the American landscape and the diverse folks that we have here.
Yes.
A population that I'm always concerned about is our undocumented. So
Yep.
in the state of California, it's different from the state of Texas or the state of Alabama or the state of Atlanta. So how do you create that safe space within Deloitte, nationwide, domestically? And what do you do? Because oftentimes, I know from a student perspective, they're very fearful about making their, you know, their origins, you know, open to others.
That's a tough question because I don't know in Deloitte how we've done it from a recruiting standpoint. I know that we have significant efforts with first generation, and through that we learn that parents are undocumented, right? And in that process, we really care and feed the individual, that first generation, because what they're having to deal with when they go home, and the fear and the anxiety that they're going to walk in their door, and you know, immigration, you know, persons could be sitting there. We really try to help with that. We don't ignore it. But in terms of undocumented coming into the organization, I am not aware. I'm not aware, and I'm happy to come back to you with that.
Sure.
But I mean, do you guys have any idea? Okay, yeah, I don't know. But I know, as I stated before on first generation, we know this is a significant issue. We've actually partnered with a number of universities to help us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
So, Christie, there are so many things that you said here. I won't do justice. I just want to pull out a few of them, right? Your work on covering has it's been pioneering, right? And I think, as I said, the first time I heard the term, I was at Deloitte, and I think if each of us in this room just said, look, by the time I go to bed tonight, I'm going to think about, you know, in what ways am I covering, right? Maybe the answer is not at all, but you might surprise yourself. You also told us, don't let anybody throw water on the fire in your belly. Be fearless. You talked to us about being purpose-driven. You know, we talk around here a lot about moving as leaders, as young leaders, from being purpose consumers, which we all are, to being purpose creators. That part of what great leaders do is they instill a larger sense of purpose in the people around them, right? You have helped us do that today, Christie. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for coming.